Hey, it's Pastor Danny with Grace City Church. It's time for a 2-minute recap. Well, this past Sunday at Grace City, we tackled these tough questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? Or, if God's such a loving God, then why does he allow pain and suffering in this world? Well, we looked at 2 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul himself was encountering some pain and suffering. He described it as a thorn in his flesh. In fact, it says that Paul prayed 3 times for God to remove it. Paul said each time he prayed, God said, "My grace is enough." In other words, I'm not removing the thorn, but I am giving you my grace. And when you're weak, I am strong. So how do we suffer well? Can I share with you 4 things that we talked about this past Sunday that I believe come straight out of God's Word? First of all, number 1, we're all going to experience pain and suffering in this world. God does not show favoritism. He's not going to protect those who are saved and only allow pain and suffering to come to those who aren't. No, we live in a broken world filled with broken people. Yeah, there was a time where God, who is a perfect God, created a perfect world. But during that time, we know that man stepped outside of God's boundaries. And as a result of that, we are now reaping the consequences of sin in this world. So no one's exempt from pain and suffering. Number 2, there was a point where Paul accepted his suffering. He prayed 3 times. And then he just didn't pray about God removing that thorn anymore. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm continuing to pray for God to remove this thorn. I want you to join me in praying that he'll one day remove this thorn." No. It's not that even Paul stopped praying, but I believe his prayers changed. In other words, Paul was saying, "God, I understand you're not going to remove this pain or suffering. If you're not going to remove it, what can I learn from it? How can I grow in it?" And God says, "You're going to learn from it. You're going to grow in it with my grace." The third thing would be this. We need to find encouragement in God's promises. We need to rest in God's promises and not look for pointless explanations. So many times we want to find out the reason why we're suffering. And God is saying, you know what? Sometimes in this life, some things just won't be able to be explained. So why don't you just rest in my grace? Because you know what? It's enough. And then fourthly, I would say this. God has a purpose in our pain. Think about it this way. Think about your car battery. Your car battery has 2 terminals, a positive and a negative. You can't just use the positive to start your car. There has to be a negative for your battery to have power. And you can't just have the negative to start your car. You got to have some positive for it to be powerful. In your life, if you want it to be powerful, let me tell you, God's going to allow you to have some positive experiences and some negative experiences. God's just not going to give you positive experiences because you'll be a spiritual spoiled brat. And God's going to protect you from all negative experiences. But God is going to use the bad with the good to make you powerful through his grace. And that's your 2-minute recap.